While the other students struggled with training, it was a piece of cake for our MC. Even when the older students started hunting the newcomers, our MC was the predator, the hunter. Some ran away in fear, tears in their eyes. But this little beast is actually 1,000 years old. In the past, he tried to be the strongest, even obtaining the dragon fruit, which is said to increase lifespan and make you stronger. But our MC grew old and died believing that the fruit was just a false legend. However, in a completely unexpected twist, Guileless opened his eyes once again. Confused, he wondered if he had merely fallen asleep. Everything felt strange. His room was different, his body felt light, and his surroundings unfamiliar. When he finally looked at his hands, his eyes widened in disbelief. These aren't my hands. Am I a baby? He quickly realized he was in a bizarre situation. But as a 10-star level martial artist, he questioned how anyone could have done this to him without him noticing. Then a thought struck him. The divine dragon and the golden fruit. He finally understood. The fruit's effect wasn't immortality, but reincarnation. Though unexpected, the realization filled him with joy. He had been granted another chance, a second life to reach the peak he failed to attain before. Soon he noticed he wasn't alone in the room. When he looked around, he realized he was inside the annex of the Dragon Manor. Somehow, he had been reborn into the same family. He then noticed that the room was filled with other infants. Just as he was wondering why there were so many babies here, a group of maids entered carrying baby bottles. But strangely, instead of milk, they carried a red liquid. Gilfus watched as the maids poured the crimson substance into the bottles. He thought they were about to feed the infants, but suddenly, one of the maids carried out a goblin. They forced the bottle into the goblin's mouth. Moments later, the goblin began to tremble violently. A red light burst from its body, and then it exploded into a shower of blood. Splattering across the room, Guileless froze in shock. Fear and confusion filled his mind. What in the world is happening here? One of the maids calmly said that the mixture would be safe if they adjusted the right amount of water. As they began feeding the red liquid to the other infants, another maid picked up Guileless himself. He looked at the bottle and immediately realized it wasn't milk. The energy coming from it was terrifyingly strong. He could sense that the liquid was dragon blood and that it was far too dangerous for a newborn's fragile body. But before he could react, the maid pushed the bottle into his mouth. Instinctively, like any infant, he began to drink. Instantly, immense power surged through his veins. His small body trembled from the pain, but Guileless recognized it. The blood of ancient dragons was coursing through him. He thought, this is dangerous, but maybe this is also an opportunity. At first, he considered stopping, but then he realized if he could absorb this power, he might surpass even his former self. He might finally reach the true summit of martial arts. With fierce determination, he continued drinking the dragon's blood. His veins bulged, his body convulsed in agony, but his will remained unbroken. Don't underestimate me, he thought. I am Gilfus Elragon. He repeated the words in his mind like a mantra, enduring the pain until miraculously he overcame it. The maid stared in disbelief as he continued to drink, surviving what should have been a death sentence. Within his tiny body, two colossal dragon energies clashed violently, battling for dominance. When one finally overpowered the other, Guileless could hardly believe how easily he had absorbed the power. When the two dragon forces finally merged within him, he realized this was the perfect opportunity. After finishing the last drop, he couldn't believe he had survived the overwhelming pain. His body hadn't exploded. Instead, it had adapted. He noticed a few other infants had also survived, which made him smirk inwardly. So he thought, never underestimate the survival instincts of a newborn. But as expected from a baby's body, exhaustion soon overcame him. His eyelids grew heavy, and despite his triumph, Gilfus Elragon, the strongest human reborn, slowly drifted into sleep. After 7 years, he was now undergoing intense physical training. While doing one-handed push-ups, a massive boulder was balanced on his feet. When he finally reached his 1,000th count, he kicked the boulder upward, and as it came crashing down onto his back, Gilfus couldn't believe the strength his body now possessed. contest. Guileless Loragan, the former family head of the Loragan clan, now lived under a new name, Zeke Loragan. Zeke thought about how he had achieved such physical power at a young age, realizing it was all thanks to the ancient dragon blood flowing in his veins. It was said that every being in this world possessed something called a source of power. But the ancient dragon blood that had been given to them as infants contained a tremendous amount of that power. Those who survived drinking it developed bodies far stronger than ordinary humans. With the divine dragon source of power within him, Zeke knew he had already surpassed the limits he reached at the same age in his past life. And since he was the only infant who had managed to drink an entire bottle of ancient dragon blood, his body underwent a drastic transformation, one even he did not expect. Yet despite his progress, what frustrated him most was that he remained a mere 1 star. He had trained relentlessly, expecting to reach at least 4 stars by now. The star was the measure of one's source power. In this world, the human body was said to resemble a universe. The more stars one had floating within that inner universe, the stronger they became. However, as the number of stars increased, so too did the difficulty of reaching the next level. In his past life as Gilfus Elragon, Zeke had achieved the unimaginable 10 stars. He was the only person in the world to ever reach such a level. Time really flies, Zeke muttered. He was now 7 years old. We learned that he was an illegitimate child of the current Loragan family. His mother had died when he was still an infant, and to this day, he had never even seen his father's face, something he considered deeply irresponsible. What shocked him most was the realization that 1,000 years had already passed since his reincarnation. He thought that reincarnation itself was already unbelievable, but after 1,000 years, the world had changed. It had become a true survival of the fittest era. The greatest proof of this was the practice of feeding infants the blood of ancient dragons, followed by a ritual known as the dragon trial. Only those who survived both the drinking of dragon blood and the dragon trial were deemed worthy to receive education and training as Loragan warriors. Naturally, Zeke should have been one of them. Yet whenever he asked the servant assigned to take care of him why no instructor had ever been sent to train him, the servant would only say that he wasn't allowed to answer such questions. Even after turning 7, Zeke had never received a single lesson. Isn't that strange? Zeke wondered aloud. Every child who survived the dragon trial was supposed to begin combat training. Everyone except him. Day after day, he lived alone with only a servant by his side. When he confronted the servant about it, the man merely asked what was wrong with that arrangement. Zeke sighed and said that for now, conditioning his body was more important than combat training. Anyway, after all, he could teach himself if he wanted to. He had once been a 10-star warrior in his past life. Zeke then requested information about the other surviving infants or anything about the main family that could help him, but once again, the servant refused, saying he wasn't permitted to disclose such information. Frustration clouded Zeke's face. "Will you always refuse to answer me?" he asked sharply. The servant bowed his head and repeated that he couldn't speak of such matters. "Isn't it cruel?" Zeke asked bitterly. "Treating me like this?" But the servant explained that he was only following orders, his duty being to attend to Zeke's daily needs, nothing more. The servant, a 3-star level practitioner, could have easily taught Zeke basic combat techniques. Yet Zeke had no interest in such trivial lessons. After 7 years of living with this man, he had grown used to the same lifeless responses. Finally, Zeke decided to leave and head into the forest. The servant said nothing, merely watching as Zeke walked away. "So, he's really going to let me go?" Zeke thought, a hint of irritation in his tone. Deep in the forest, Zeke uprooted wild poisonous herbs and ate them without hesitation. As before, the taste was vile, but this was part of his training method. Then, suddenly, he noticed something. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to stay calm as he repeated to himself, "Be patient, be patient." He could feel someone or something watching him from afar, observing his every move. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't shake the presence. After a few moments, Zeke sighed. "They followed me all the way here, huh?" When he could no longer stand it, he called out, "You might as well come out if you got something to say." Then he moved into the tall grass, grass, hiding himself. Moments later, while crouched in the grass, Zeke sensed a dark, oppressive aura nearby. When he looked toward the source, he saw a creature known as an anger bobar. What is that aura? He wondered. The black mist surrounding the beast was something he had never seen before, not even 1,000 years ago. As the anger boar grazed on the grass, Zeke suddenly stood and revealed himself, startling the beast. It charged at him immediately, and rather than fear, a smile formed on Zeke's face. He was genuinely thrilled to fight it. The boar lunged forward, but Zeke swiftly dodged, gathering golden energy into his fist. With a powerful strike, he unleashed an explosion that tore through the anger boar's body. He couldn't help but grin at the sight. His attack had been far stronger than he expected. Even as a 1-star, his power surpassed that of most practitioners at the same level. Hoisting the slain creature over his shoulder, Zeke muttered, "It'll be even better once I raise my star level." He was tired. Tired of 7 years of being ignored and isolated by the dragon family, he wondered if it was time to leave and travel on his own, maybe even venture toward the ocean. Meanwhile, in the distance, a cloaked man watched from the shadows. "What's going on with that boy?" he muttered. "Even without formal training, he's reached 1-star level, and he killed that anger boar with a single strike." What puzzled the man even more was how Zeke managed to sense his presence. "That child isn't ordinary," he said quietly. He recalled that Zeke's mother had died young, and his father, the current family head, had shown no interest in him. Without proper guidance, the boy shouldn't have grown this strong. Still, as the son, illegitimate or not, of the dragon head, Zeke was bound to remain under the clan's watch. That was why someone like him had been assigned to monitor the boy from the shadows. An illegitimate son, yet the blood of the family head runs through his veins, the man whispered. Could that be why he's so strong? Uncertain, he chuckled softly. That kid will be interesting to watch in the future. Then he disappeared into the darkness. Back at Zeke's home, the boy was packing his belongings, ready to set off on his journey. But suddenly he sensed several powerful presences outside, 3 4-star practitioners and 1 5-star. What are they doing here? He thought, stepping quietly to the door to listen. From their conversation, he heard them talking about how fresh and clean the air was in such a remote place, and how peaceful it was since there were no nearby rifts. Hearing this, Zeke concluded that they weren't assassins. They didn't sound like bad people at all. Deciding to confront them directly, he opened his door and asked, "What business do you have here?" The group froze in surprise. Then Zeke noticed the emblem embroidered on their clothing, the mark of the Laragan clan. "Ellen," he muttered under his breath, wondering what they wanted from him. The men quickly bowed. "It's an honor to finally meet you, young Master Zeke," their leader said. "We've been sent to escort you to the site of your examination. Zeke frowned in confusion. Annoyance flickered across his face. "They expect me to take an exam," he muttered, "even though they haven't taught me a damn thing yet." And after a few days, Zeke could hardly believe that he had returned once again to the main estate of the Laragan family. He told us that he wasn't brought here to live again within the main estate, but rather for another purpose. Before he could enter, they instructed him to change out of his dirty clothes first. Zeke then began to explain about something known as the Dragon's Nest. After 1,000 years, the Laragan family had established a school that served all branches of their bloodline. Everyone born with any relation or connection to the Laragan family dreamed of entering this so-called Dragon's Nest to receive proper education once they turned 7 years old. And today marked the day of the entrance ceremony for that academy. Zeke was here to take part in the entrance exam. Even though he hadn't learned anything about the modern generation of his family, taking the exam was mandatory. Zeke immediately felt disheartened when he realized that this was the true reason they had brought him here. Why now, he thought, when he had already decided to leave and travel the world. While sitting by the school gate, a boy from Ordiskal village approached him. It was Rangus who asked if he was all right and what seemed to be bothering him. When Zeke asked who he was, the boy formally introduced himself as Rangus and said he had approached because Zeke looked troubled. "Is that so?" Zeke replied casually. After observing the flow of energy in Rangus's body, Zeke quietly thought to himself that the boy seemed shy but had an unusually unusually strong sense of perception. Zeke then apologized for his situation, introducing himself in return and admitting that his mind was in turmoil because he had no idea what they would be required to do in the exam. "Is that all?" said Rangus, feeling slightly nervous at the mention of the test. Still, he explained that the annual entrance exam for the Dragon's Nest didn't really change much. But when Zeke admitted he knew nothing about the exam, Rangus was shocked, taking the test without any knowledge at all. Wasn't that far too reckless and dangerous? Just as Rangus was about to explain the details of the exam, a loud and arrogant voice suddenly interrupted them. A boastful boy shouted and called Rangus a weakling. Rangus turned around in shock and immediately recognized who it was. It was Retin, also from Ortiscale Village. Mocking him, Retin asked why he was here, suggesting that he must have gotten lost to end up at the Dragon's Nest. He even told him it would be better to go home before he got hurt. "I'm here to take the entrance exam," Rangus replied, though his voice trembled as Retin drew closer. Asking if he was seriously going to take the test, Retin clutched his stomach and burst out laughing, saying it was impossible for him to pass. He even insulted Rangus's father, saying, "Your father's a pseudo-dragon, right? What could the son of a pseudo-dragon possibly accomplish?" Rangus's fists trembled as he held back his anger, but Zeke noticed everything. Then it was explained to us that the Laragan family followed an absolute hierarchy. The ranks were as follows: novice whelp dragons, regular soldier child dragons, captain-level adult dragons, executive elder dragons, also known as elders, and at the very bottom were the pseudo-dragons. Those who had failed to enter or graduate from the Dragon's Nest considered immature and incomplete dragons. Yet Rangus had long dreamed of proving that even if they were called pseudo-dragons, they were still dragons. Nonetheless, Zeke was surprised and asked why Retin was so sure Rangus would fail the exam even before it started. "Who the hell do you think you are?" Retin snapped. Asking if Zeke had a problem with him, Zeke calmly said he was merely curious why Retin was so confident Rangus couldn't pass. Retin pointed at Rangus and shouted that the reason was obvious. He was just a weakling. Zeke tilted his head and asked if he really said Rangus was weak, because from what he could sense, Rangus seemed even stronger than them. Hearing that, Rangus's eyes widened in disbelief. It was the first time someone had stood up for him. The arrogant boys grew angry and asked if Zeke was seriously claiming they were weaker than a pseudo-dragon, a being they saw as inferior. But before things could escalate, a man arrived and drew everyone's attention. He was the adult dragon examiner, announcing that the Dragon's Nest entrance exam was about to begin and that all participants should register to receive their numbers. As Retin left, he glared at Zeke and warned that he wouldn't forget his face. Zeke sighed and said there was no need for anger, remarking that the children of this generation seemed to have such short tempers. Rangus quickly replied, "That wasn't that strange since they were about the same age." Rangus added that anyone would be angry if told they were weaker than him. "Is that so?" Zeke muttered lightly. Since the entrance exam was mandatory, they had no choice but to take it. Though Zeke was surprised when Rangus said it was actually possible to skip the test, Zeke's eyes widened, and Rangus realized Zeke truly didn't know anything about it. Rangus advised him that it might be better to withdraw now before he got hurt. But Zeke replied confidently that a genius like him would never withdraw from a challenge. Rangus could only shake his head and say that Zeke was overly confident despite knowing nothing about the exam. Zeke simply laughed and said that whatever the test may be, they should hurry since it was about to start. Rangus had no choice but to agree. When they arrived at the testing grounds, the examiner announced that the exam was simple. To pass, they only needed to scratch the stones placed behind him. However, no other weapons were allowed except those provided by the academy. Still, they were free to use their bare hands if they wished, but each participant only had 3 attempts. "That's it?" Zeke said, sounding unimpressed. After surviving the dragon trial when they were still infants, he expected something far more terrifying and intense, but this seemed disappointingly simple. The examiner then called the first participant and instructed him to begin. The boy, nervous but determined, struck the massive stone with all his strength. The sound of metal clashing against rock echoed loudly, ringing in their ears. But to everyone's shock, the boy's sword snapped in half, and the recoil shattered his arm. Zeke was stunned at what he saw. As the boy writhed in pain, the examiner calmly said that he still had 2 remaining attempts and asked if he wished to continue. But since the boy could no longer stand, the examiner declared him failed and ordered the others to clean up the area. As the injured participant was dragged away, the next number was called. Rangus trembled in fear at what he witnessed, while Zeke grew annoyed. "So this is what they call an exam," he muttered. He then asked what kind of stones they were using. It was explained that the stones possessed regenerative properties. Any scratches would vanish in an instant. Moreover, they could reflect physical force 100-fold when struck with power. Zeke immediately said that such materials were far too excessive for an entrance exam, but Rangus explained that it was still possible to scratch them if one could properly circulate their source power throughout their entire body before attacking. "I see," Zeke said. He realized that the circulation of source power was far more important than martial arts skills in this exam. After glancing at the other participants, he thought that only a few would be able to pass, including those arrogant boys. As the exam continued, more and more failed than passed. Many were injured badly due to the stone's ability to reflect ordinary physical attacks. Then, after a few moments, the examiner called out Zeke's number. "It's my turn," Zeke said with a calm smile. Rangus, still nervous, asked if he really had no intention of withdrawing, but Zeke simply walked forward, telling him not to worry. As he approached the examiner, the man's eyes widened in shock. Zeke's aura began to flare up, faintly revealing the might from his previous life as guileless. The examiner told him to step forward and choose a weapon, but Zeke said it wasn't necessary. His fists alone would be enough. The crowd murmured in disbelief. No matter how skilled he might be in circulating source power, they thought there was no way he could scratch the stone with his bare hands. His fists would surely shatter instead. Some of them said that not only Zeke's fists, but also his arms would be destroyed, which made Rangus extremely nervous for him. Along with his fear came anger toward himself, thinking he should have forcibly stopped Zeke to prevent him from getting hurt. The examiner then gave the signal to begin. As Zeke approached the massive stone, he placed his hand on it, noting that this was the first time he had ever seen such a material. He thought to himself that it must have been formed over 1,000 years ago, and even now there were still many things about the current generation that he didn't fully understand. But that didn't matter anymore. He immediately gathered his source power into his fist. While Rangus trembled with anxiety about what might happen to Zeke, our protagonist was actually filled with excitement because for the first time he could use his full strength. He decided to use the mysterious stone to measure his current power. Rangus's eyes widened once more as Zeke unleashed the first form of the Dragon Destruction combat technique, Burst Strike against the stone. A tremendous surge of energy erupted from the impact. Fragments of the shattered rock flew everywhere, and the violent wind from the blast sent dust and debris swirling through the air. In awe, yet on guard, Rangus quickly shielded himself from the aftermath, while the examiner's eyes widened in disbelief at what he had just witnessed. As the dust began to settle, Zeke stood there with a smile on his face, remarking that the technique he used still seemed too much for his current strength. Despite the severe injuries to his hand, he laughed at himself, realizing he still needed much more intense training. The other participants were speechless at what they had seen. Retin looked both shocked and annoyed that Zeke had destroyed the enchanted stone. A woman watching commented that Zeke was truly interesting. While the others still couldn't get over what had happened, Zeke waited happily for the examiner to announce the results, but the examiner was still in shock. The stone Zeke had destroyed was known to regenerate itself, and the only ones capable of breaking it were supposed to be those who had already reached the 4-star level or higher. Yet now a mere child stood before him, having done what seemed impossible. "He's just an illegitimate son," the examiner muttered to himself, then wondered if Zeke's ability came from the blood of the family head that still flowed within him. He also realized that the technique Zeke used seemed strangely familiar. Still dazed, the examiner didn't respond right away, so Zeke called out to him impatiently, asking for the result. Snapping back to his senses, the examiner finally declared that Zeke had passed the test. One of the examiners then handed handed Zeke a small bottle containing a green liquid curious. Zeke asked what it was, but the man only asked if he could leave already since Zeke was blocking the area. Annoyed, Zeke frowned and muttered if everyone in this generation was this rude. Before he could complain further, Rangus ran up to him with excitement, praising Zeke's performance. Zeke proudly grinned and said it was nothing but peanuts. Zeke then asked what the liquid was, and Rangus explained that it was a healing potion, the standard potion of the Eldragon family. Healing potion? Zeke repeated. Rangus confirmed it. But since Zeke was an illegitimate son of the family, he suspected it might be poison. However, since Rangus had vouched for it, he wondered if it might actually be a spiritual medicine. The elixir known as Cloud-Piercing Clarity Wood was made from extremely rare materials, herbs found only in secret realms, along with the pure source power of divine beasts and the essence of elusive phantom beasts. When used, it could heal not only fresh wounds but also old scars and injuries. On top of that, it could enhance one's source power. Because the ingredients were so rare and the process so complex, such elixirs were rarely seen. After drinking it, Zeke was amazed by its immediate effect on his body. "Is this really a spirit medicine?" he asked Rangus. Rangus replied that he didn't know what spirit medicine meant, but he was certain that the Laragan family's potions were of far higher quality than any commercial ones outside their domain. Rangus then asked if the potion's effect surprised Zeke that much. "Of course," Zeke said, explaining that it healed both his serious injuries and the strain from his training. Still, he noticed that unlike spirit medicine, it didn't seem to boost his source power. Rangus, on the other hand, said he was even more amazed by Zeke himself, to which Zeke chuckled and told him not to joke. Zeke thought to himself that the potion's existence showed how far knowledge had advanced over the last 1,000 years. Rangus praised Zeke's strength again, and Zeke declared that his dream was to become the strongest of all soon. The examiner announced that Retin had also passed the test, as well as his companions. Zeke expected as much, but then Rangus trembled nervously when his number was called. Despite his fear, he gathered his courage and walked to the front. Watching his stiff movements, Zeke wondered why Rangus was so nervous, then shouted to encourage him, telling him to trust himself. Embarrassed, Rangus asked him to lower his voice. When Rangus chose a sword as his weapon, Zeke watched closely, wondering what he was doing. Once the examiner gave the signal, Rangus attacked the stone, but as he expected, he failed on his first try. Determined, he stood again for another attempt, but his strike bounced off the stone, causing him to lose his balance and fall. His hands trembled from the stone's reflective ability. Retin and his group burst into laughter, saying it was just as they expected. The son of a pseudo-dragon was nothing more than a pseudo-dragon himself. They mocked him, telling him to give up. Retin even sneered at Zeke, asking if this was the same man he claimed could pass, and if Rangus was truly stronger than them. Zeke stayed silent for a moment, then told them to stop spouting nonsense. The examiner informed Rangus that he only had one attempt left and asked if he still wanted to continue. Rangus couldn't answer, overwhelmed by embarrassment and the ridicule of others. He lowered his head, but then Zeke walked up to him and asked what he was doing. He questioned why Rangus was using a sword instead of a spear, why he would choose a weapon that didn't suit him, and why he would take a test without any plan at all. Retin watched mockingly as Zeke told Rangus that in his current condition, he wouldn't even scratch the stone no matter how many times he tried. Retin and his group laughed again, calling Zeke an idiot, reminding him that Rangus knew nothing about using a spear. His weak father only ever taught him swordsmanship, they said, and switching weapons now wouldn't change the outcome. But Zeke ignored their jeers and called out to the examiner, asking if it was against the rules to change weapons. The examiner said it wasn't. "Then Rangus is lucky," Zeke said with a grin. He turned to Rangus and asked if he trusted him. Memories of all the humiliation he and his father had suffered flashed through Rangus's mind. Gritting his teeth, he stood tall and said he would trust Zeke. He would fight with a spear just as Zeke told him to. Rangus told us that his father never managed to enter the dragon's nest. Because of that, people called him a pseudo-dragon and laughed at him. But despite all the humiliation, his father endured everything just to raise Rangus properly. That's why Rangus swore to prove to everyone that he, Rangus, the son raised with care by his father, is also a true dragon. He stood up once more more, gripping the spear tightly in his hands, and declared that today he would prove that neither he nor his father were fake dragons. He also realized that if he tried again with a sword, the result would only be the same as before. So this time he decided to trust Zeke completely. The only problem was that he didn't know how to use a spear. Zeke called out to him, and as he pointed toward the enchanted stone, he told Rangus that there was nothing else he needed to do. Just thrust the spear straight into the stone without thinking about anything else. Just pierce it straight through, Zeke said firmly. Rangus tightened his grip on the spear. He knew that under normal circumstances, stabbing the stone directly wouldn't cause even the slightest damage, especially since it had a strong regeneration element. But Zeke was the first person to ever stand up for him, even though they had just met that very day. It was something new and unfamiliar to him, but because of that, he chose to place his full trust in Zeke and believe in his own strength. This time he gathered his source power into the spear and immediately noticed something strange. For years, he had wielded a sword, yet he had never managed to wrap it in this much source energy, something he was now effortlessly doing with the spear. With a determined shout, Rangus unleashed his full power and struck the stone with everything he had. Retin nearly died laughing, saying exactly what he had predicted, that changing weapons wouldn't help him pass the test. But Rangus didn't stop. He felt something different, something powerful. The spear in his hands felt like an extension of his own body. Then, as he drove the weapon forward with all his strength, the spear pierced through the enchanted stone completely. The shock on Retin's face and those of his companions was priceless. Even the examiners couldn't hide their astonishment, delighted by what they had just witnessed. Rangus hadn't just scratched the stone. He had pierced straight through it. Zeke immediately praised him. While Rangus himself could hardly believe what he'd done, even after the examiner officially declared that he had passed, Rangus still asked in disbelief if he had really succeeded. Zeke smiled, wrapped an arm around his shoulder, and confirmed it. Overwhelmed with joy, Rangus nearly cried as he hugged Zeke tightly, shouting over and over that he had done it, that he had passed the test. Rhet's group, however, refused to believe it. They called it luck, but Retin himself stayed silent, shaking with rage. He couldn't accept that, just as Zeke had said, Rangus was actually stronger than them, and that his result was far better. The examiner then announced that the test had officially ended. Afterward, he declared that the entrance ceremony would begin shortly. Zeke immediately asked if the test was truly over. Rangus replied that it seemed so, but added that there would probably be more tests once they entered the dragon's nest. Soon, a group of men emerged from a dark hallway. When they stepped into the light, the examiner announced that the head of the Luragan family would now deliver a speech to congratulate those who passed. The moment Zeke saw the man, he asked who the person with the cold, dark expression was. Rangus, clearly nervous, replied that it was the family head himself. "That's the family head," Zeke said. "Why does he look like that? He's not even smiling. He looks colder than ice." Rangus immediately covered Zeke's mouth, whispering that it would be best if he stayed quiet, repeating his plea for him to stop talking. Zeke nodded. When he looked again at the group, he remarked that these people represented the current power of the Luragan family. Some of them were at the 7-star level, while others were 6-star. To Zeke, their strength was impressive, especially since the current family head, Balsa Luragan, was an 8-star level powerhouse 1,000 years ago. Only a handful of people had ever reached that level. Still, Zeke wasn't sure how many existed in this current era. "I don't like this family head," Zeke muttered, but before he could say more, Rangus tried to hush him again. Zeke sighed and thought to himself that he never expected this man to be his father in this lifetime. A dark, fiery aura radiated from Balsa's body, making the entire area feel heavy. The examiner quickly ordered everyone to stay silent because Master Balsa was about to speak. When Balsa stepped forward, he uttered only a few words. They must all strive to become the flesh and blood of the Luragan family. As he spoke, the terrifying pressure of his aura spread across the hall. Zeke wasn't affected, but many of the examinees trembled in fear, some struggling to breathe as their bodies froze under the immense pressure. Zeke noticed that even Rangus was affected. He couldn't believe how easily everyone around him was overwhelmed by the family head's presence. More than that, Zeke could sense an intense hatred hidden within Balsa's aura. He didn't know the reason behind it, but even so, he couldn't bring himself to like the man who was supposedly his father. When Balsa turned away, another man stepped forward and drew everyone's attention. He had blonde hair and cheerfully thanked Balsa for his words. He then said that Master Balsa had high expectations for them all, and that just like his master, he would also keep his own speech short. As Zeke wondered who this man was, the speaker simply told everyone to train hard and grow stronger. "That's it," one of the examiners muttered. The man smiled and said that people who worry too much about small things go bald early, so he wouldn't bother with long speeches. Zeke couldn't understand what was wrong with them, but at least the atmosphere in the hall had lightened up. The examiner then announced that the new students would now be assigned to their dormitories. Everyone whose number was called had to head there immediately. Zeke asked if they wouldn't all be staying in the same dormitory, and Rangus explained that there were 4 east, west, south, and north dorms. Every student accepted into the academy was allowed to live in one of those 4 halls. When Zeke's number was called, he stood up and waved goodbye to Rangus. He was assigned to the east hall. As he walked through the corridor, he commented that a lot had changed in this place over the past 1,000 years. After finding his room, he said that he must have gotten lost since it took him a while to arrive, and his roommate had probably gotten there first. When he opened the door, he cheerfully greeted his new roommate and apologized for being late. He then said that from today on, they'd be sharing the same room, but to his surprise, his new roommate turned out to be none other than Rangus himself. Zeke couldn't help but laugh, saying it seemed like fate kept linking them together. He asked if there was anything else scheduled for the day, and Rangus confirmed that their training would start tomorrow. "Is that so?" Zeke said casually, prompting Rangus to ask if he hadn't listened to the examiner's earlier explanation. Zeke admitted that he hadn't on purpose. Rangus sighed and said they should get some rest early since training would begin the next day. As Zeke gazed out the window, he thought about his plan to escape from the Laragan family and travel the world. But after what he'd learned about the enchanted stone with regenerative properties and the healing potion, he realized he had discovered many interesting things during the exam. If he truly wanted to understand all the changes that had taken place over the past 1,000 years, he thought, then maybe staying with the Elragon family for a while wouldn't be such a bad idea after all. A month passed at the academy, and their training continued to grow harsher, holding heavy dumbbells in both hands. The instructor explained that the dragon's breath he was teaching them was one of the most important techniques ever created by the 15th Laragan family head. After reminding them that they had to master the technique under any condition, the instructor's attention was drawn to a few students. Some of them, he noticed, had already mastered dragon's breath, especially the young woman he called Master Leah. Her overflowing energy suggested that she was close to reaching the 2-star level. But aside from her, one other student caught his eye, and he could hardly believe what he was seeing. Zeke was training, while not only holding the dumbbells, but also balancing large stones on his head and arms. The instructor stared in disbelief and muttered to himself that the blood of the family head truly ran in Zeke's veins. However, it was said that no one had ever taught Zeke anything since he was a child, which is why everything he was witnessing now felt unfamiliar to him. Zeke, on the other hand, couldn't believe that the technique he once called the Dragon King's breathing technique had been further developed by the succeeding family heads, and that it was now being taught to other branches of the family as well. According to Zeke, breathing techniques were methods that gathered the source power from the surroundings into the body. Once circulated, this source power would strengthen a person's own inner energy. The effectiveness of such techniques depended on an individual's ability and intellect. That was why the great families of this world kept their techniques secret, never allowing them to be learned by outsiders or those not belonging to their bloodline. Zeke also realized that the dragon's breath was a safe and simple technique, easy enough to master, but it was useless to him if it could only be used while resting. His own version of the breathing technique allowed him to manipulate the surrounding source power even while moving. Because of that, it was far more complex and powerful in actual combat, but also much harder to learn. Only a few had ever mastered it. He thought the current generation must have simplified his original version so that even the family's branch members could learn it, and that decision had clearly helped strengthen the Dragon family. Zeke couldn't help but feel a strange satisfaction. He never imagined that the techniques he had discovered long ago would still have an impact after 1,000 years. It made him wonder if the other martial arts techniques he created had also evolved over time. Interesting, he muttered to himself, amused by the thought. Leah, meanwhile, quietly observed Zeke from a distance. Later in the cafeteria, the other students were astonished by how much food Zeke was eating. As he continued devouring his meal, he noticed Rangus sitting silently across from him. "What's wrong?" Zeke asked. "You won't get strong if you don't eat." Rangus simply asked if Zeke didn't find his stamina strange. "That's it," Zeke replied. "You just need to eat more if you want to get stronger. Train harder. Push yourself." He even offered some of his food to Rangus, but the latter politely declined, saying he'd had enough. As Zeke thought about how some of the students were already well-trained even before entering the academy, a girl suddenly approached them. "You're quite impressive," Leah said, her tone calm yet confident. Zeke blinked. "And who are you supposed to be?" he asked casually. Rangus immediately choked on his food, whispering nervously, "You don't know who she is? That's Master Leah, the daughter of the family head, Lord Balsa." "Oh," Zeke said indifferently. "What do you want me to do about that? I don't know her." Rangus began sweating profusely. "You can't talk like that. Master Leah is one of the candidates to become the next family head. She's not someone you can just speak to casually." "Is that so?" Zeke replied. "Well, I'm a family head's child too. An illegitimate one, though." Rangus froze in shock while Leah looked at him curiously. "Is that true?" she asked. "You're really the family head's illegitimate son?" The narrator's voice continued. Leah Typhon Elragan, one of the candidates to inherit the Laragan family, was now standing before Zeke herself. "Why would I lie about that?" Zeke said, shrugging. Leah frowned slightly. "Then tell me, how could an illegitimate child like you destroy the magic stone with your bare hands? How could someone not from a renowned family possess such strength?" "Because I'm Zeke," he replied confidently, turning back to Rangus. "Stop staring and finish your food." Both Leah and Rangus fell silent for a moment. Then Leah suddenly smiled. "You really are an interesting person," she said, before sitting down beside him. "How about serving under me? I'll make you one of my followers." Zeke raised an eyebrow. "What exactly do you mean by that?" "I want you to join me," she said. "Be my ally, and I'll be your backer. Every illegitimate child needs allies and influence, don't they? Use your strength to help me become the next family head. And once I do, I'll help you achieve your own dreams." Zeke didn't even hesitate. "No," he said flatly. Leah frowned again. "Why not? Don't tell me you want to become the family head yourself." As her aura flared with a faint crackling energy, Zeke could tell that she was close to reaching 2-star level. For someone her age to release an aura like that, she was indeed impressive. Still, Zeke remained calm. "You can think and do whatever you want," he said, "but I have no interest in being family head or any kind of title." "Why?" Leah asked coldly. Zeke stabbed his knife into the table. "Because I don't need to serve anyone," he said, his voice steady but sharp. "I'm the strongest person there is." The cafeteria went silent. Even Leah couldn't believe what she was feeling. Zeke's presence had completely overwhelmed her for a moment. Rangus immediately stepped in to diffuse the tension, urging both of them to calm down. But Leah wasn't the type to back off, embarrassed and angered by what just happened. She decided to challenge Zeke to a duel. Zeke, however, didn't seem to care and simply continued eating. Moments later, a commotion spread across the campus. "Where are they going?" one student asked. "To the training grounds." Another replied, "There's going to be a duel between the younger generation. Master Leah herself is fighting." "What? Master Leah from the Typhon family?" someone exclaimed. "Who's brave enough to challenge her?" When they arrived at the training grounds, everyone whispered among themselves, wondering who would face her. Zeke, meanwhile, couldn't believe Leah was actually serious about the duel. "Are you all right with this?" Rangus asked nervously. "You'll be fighting Master Leah. Even if you call her master, I don't know who she is," Zeke replied bluntly. Rangus sighed. "You should at least show some respect now that I know you're also the family head's son. Do what you want," Zeke said. Still, Rangus tried to explain. "What's important now is that you understand who you're up against. Master Leah isn't just anyone. She's the daughter of Lord Balsa Laragan, and she also carries the blood of the Typhon family, one of the 4 great families supporting the Laragans. She's a prodigy who mastered all forms of the Typhina family's hereditary lightning great sword technique at a young age. Like her father's other children, she has terrifying talent." Zeke tilted his head. "I didn't understand a word of that except that she's the family head's daughter." Rangus stared at him. "How do you not know any of this? Because I don't," Zeke said plainly. "So don't ask me." Rangus blinked as Zeke suddenly laughed. "But since I don't know anything about her," he said with a grin, "that'll just make the fight more fun." Sounds exciting. Rangus could only sigh in and worry. No matter how strong Zeke was, Master Leah was on another level entirely. "Why did you even accept her challenge?" he asked. "I never run from a fight," Zeke answered, "and it looks like my challenger's ready anyway." At that moment, Leah stood with her sword planted firmly in the ground. Her aura flared, lightning crackling faintly around her. "Are you two done talking?" she asked coldly. Leah shouted, asking if they were finally done talking, and Zeke replied that he was ready. Ranges, trembling in fear and shock, immediately ran away from them, warning Zeke to be careful in their fight. Zeke then turned to Leah and asked why she was so determined to fight him. Leah explained that she wanted to become the next family head of the Laragan family, and to achieve that, she needed to defeat Zeke and make him one of her followers. "What do you mean by that?" Zeke asked, wondering what his connection was to her dream of becoming the family head. Leah questioned him back, asking if he truly had no idea about the current situation of their family, and whether being an illegitimate child was the reason he was so unaware. Zeke simply answered that he didn't, admitting that his knowledge about their family was limited. Because of that, Leah began explaining. She said that, including both of them, there were 5 candidates to become the next family head. Except for Zeke, all of her siblings were connected to the 4 major branch families of the Laragan clan. The position of family head was so important that it became a source of conflict among those branches. For that reason, all of Zeke's siblings had entered the Dragon's Nest to study and represent their respective families. Since the fight for succession had turned into a fierce competition, Leah needed strong allies to stand against her older brothers. Zeke quickly understood that this was a power struggle between the 4 main branches of the Laragan family. He found it all too complicated and wasn't even sure if he wanted to understand it. Leah then continued saying that as one of the candidates for family head, she needed to strengthen not only her knowledge and power, but also her influence by gathering strong followers. Without another word, she charged straight towards Zeke, declaring that she would defeat him right then and there to make him one of her subordinates. But Zeke easily dodged her powerful strike, as well as the flurry of attacks that followed. Still, Leah refused to let him escape. The onlookers couldn't believe what they were seeing. The speed of their movements was incredible. Leah's attacks, despite her heavy greatsword, flowed so smoothly and rapidly that it seemed almost effortless. As they watched the battle between the siblings, the crowd began to murmur about Leah's precise control over her source power, noting how her strikes were becoming faster and stronger over time. They could only marvel at the power of a true daughter of the family head from one of the main branches. Some even said the fight's result was already obvious. What they didn't know, however, was that Leah herself was growing increasingly frustrated. She couldn't understand how Zeke kept dodging every single one of her attacks, or why it felt like he was simply toying with her ranges. Who was watching from a distance couldn't help but be amazed, his earlier worries fading away as he saw Zeke's calm movements. Zeke then remarked that the martial arts Leah was using were unlike anything he had seen before. He admitted that her movements were far faster than those of any ordinary 1-star level fighter. But Leah, irritated, shouted for him to stop talking and focus on their fight. Zeke clenched his fist and said he was already focused, and that was exactly why he could unleash such a powerful strike so easily. His punch landed squarely, and Leah immediately gagged from the force. She fell to her knees, gripping her sword and stomach in pain. The spectators gasped and began whispering among themselves, wondering how Zeke managed to avoid all of Leah's attacks, and who this mysterious boy truly was. As Leah struggled to stand, she asked why none of her strikes could land compared to other 1-star fighters. She knew she was much faster, so logically Zeke shouldn't be able to keep up. Zeke admitted that she was indeed faster than any 1-star he had ever seen, but in his eyes, she was still just a 1-star. "You're a 1-star too," Leah snapped, saying that Zeke shouldn't be able to match her speed and movement. movements. There's a simple reason for that, Zeke replied. Your breathing, the movement of your eyes, even the shift of your muscles. I can read them all. By observing these small details, I can predict your next move. It's all based on experience. Don't make me laugh, Leah shouted, launching another fast strike toward him. But Zeke easily dodged again, saying that just like his words a moment ago, he could see and read her every move. In the next instant, he countered with another powerful attack that sent Leah crashing into the wall with a violent force. The spectators screamed in shock, asking if Leah had really been defeated. Master Zeke, that was amazing. You beat Master Leah, Rangus shouted in excitement. But Zeke calmly said that it wasn't over yet. Their fight wasn't finished. As the dust cleared, Leah stood once again, bruised but defiant. Zeke noted that she had focused her source power into her core, allowing her to endure his attack without suffering serious damage. He smiled slightly and admitted that Leah was truly an extraordinary girl. That's enough, Master Leah, Rangus pleaded. But Zeke told him to move back, warning that he could get caught in their next exchange. Zeke then noticed an intense surge of aura flowing from Leah. He wondered if she had just advanced to the 2-star level. The spectators noticed it too. They couldn't be mistaken. The glowing mark on her body was proof that she had indeed become a 2-star with a white aura. The 2-star level was a stage where one could channel source power into their martial arts, even manifesting it outside their body. As Leah thanked Zeke, saying that because of him, she had achieved the 2-star level earlier than expected. But because of that, she declared, you no longer have any chance of winning. With her aura blazing, she charged towards Zeke, her great sword surrounded by radiant power. Zeke only laughed. He looked genuinely thrilled. He said with excitement, dodging another rapid strike, you've really improved. Your speed is incredible now. But his expression suddenly changed when he felt a sting on his cheek. A shallow cut. Zeke said to himself, I know I dodged that attack. Leah smirked and asked if he could finally see the difference in their strength. She said proudly, this is my true ability. Now that I've become a full 2-star and gained my aura, I'll show you the real power of the true Thunder Great Sword technique, Zeke said, smiling in excitement. Oh, then I get to witness a martial art I've never seen before. To him, this was turning out to be the most thrilling and enjoyable moment of their fight. Leah suddenly unleashed the Lightning Greatsword technique. Lightning flash, her sword crackling with blinding golden energy as she charged forward. Zeke was instantly enveloped in a storm of lightning, forcing him to retreat a step back as he shouted, wait a second, what kind of technique was that? How can you manipulate lightning like that? Isn't this too much for a sparring match? Leah smirked, driving her sword into the ground as golden light surged around her, saying, you seem surprised. And she said calmly, summoning another move, lightning net. Sparks erupted from the earth, forming a glowing web of electricity that shot towards Zeke, but he narrowly dodged it. As he landed, he muttered to himself, her power has grown tremendously. Her strength now is nothing like before. At this rate, this fight won't be easy. The audience murmured in awe, unable to hide their astonishment. Ever since Leah had advanced to 2-star level, the tide of the battle had completely turned. Rangus, who had been watching anxiously, began to worry. Zeke noticed that Leah's movements were simple, nothing new compared to her 1-star self, but every swing of her blade now carried far greater force. Her Lightning Great Sword technique was overflowing with power, her aura amplifying each strike. What surprised Zeke even more was the speed Leah was moving faster than he could have anticipated, and her lightning felt strangely mysterious. Still, he remained confident. Even if she could cloak herself in thunder, he was sure he could counter it. Yet curiosity filled him. What kind of power was this? What kind of lightning could she command? While evading her continuous assaults, he studied her every move, analyzing her aura and its rhythm. Leah, noticing Zeke's calm smile as he danced away from her attacks, frowned, still smiling. You look too relaxed for someone in a duel, she sneered. Let's see how long that lasts. She dashed forward once more, her sword blazing with light as she used swift thunder, enveloping herself in golden lightning. But again, Zeke evaded at the last moment. She's as fast as lightning itself, he thought, only for Leah to swing her sword mid mid-charge. The blow struck true this time, sending Zeke flying backward with a powerful shock wave that scattered dust and debris across the field. Rangus gasped and rushed toward Zeke out of sheer panic, but one of the spectators grabbed his arm to stop him. Meanwhile, Zeke stood up, his clothes scorched, but his will unshaken. Leah charged again, unleashing another lightning flash, striking him head-on. Yet Zeke still stood tall afterward. Leah muttered, her brow furrowed in disbelief. "How is he still standing?" Rangus ran toward them, shouting, "Master Leah, stop! That's enough. We've already seen your strength." But Leah snapped back coldly, saying, "Do you not understand, Rangus?" Stopping mid-battle would be an insult to Zeke desperate. Rangus turned to Zeke and begged, saying, "Please, Master Zeke, surrender." Leah chuckled and said, "That's enough. He's right. Judging by your condition, surrendering would be wise. If you kneel and pledge loyalty to me, I'll stop." But Zeke only smiled silently. Leah's eyes hardened. "Even as an illegitimate child, you're truly a proud Loregan," she said with a hint of mockery. She raised her great sword high, her aura surging, saying, "If that's what you want, then I'll use my full strength to end this." Lightning roared from the heavens as Leah summoned her first secret art heaven's thunder. A colossal surge of golden energy descended, shattering the stones beneath Zeke's feet. Thunderbolts struck his body in a storm of divine fury. Rangus cried out in terror, watching his friend's body engulfed by golden lightning, smoke rising from his charred form. Leah drove her sword into the ground, exhaled deeply, and said softly, "I'm sorry, Zeke, but this is the end." But then a voice echoed through the crackling air, saying, "Is that so?" In an instant, a brilliant golden lightning aura exploded skyward. Leah's eyes widened in shock as she turned around. "Impossible," she stammered, inquiring, "How can this be? How do you have a lightning aura?" Zeke stood smiling calmly as golden arcs danced across his skin, saying, "So this is what you call lightning aura?" He said casually, "If you're asking how I got it, I honestly don't know." His tone was calm, but his words sent ripples through the crowd. Leah whispered, "Impossible," unable to believe what she was seeing. Zeke smirked, saying, "Truth is, I let you hit me on purpose. I wanted to study your lightning, how it flows, how it behaves, and somehow I learned to use it myself." "That's absurd," Leah snapped inwardly. Zeke explained to himself that he had deliberately taken Leah's attacks because her lightning intrigued him. While enduring her strikes, he continuously activated his Dragon King's breath technique. The strange resonance between his breathing and her lightning caused golden energy to gather in his body. Before he knew it, he could manipulate the lightning himself. Maybe Leah has a unique constitution, he thought, and judging from her family's great sword technique, it's likely their whole bloodline shares this lightning affinity. Zeke walked toward her confidently. "I never expected lightning-type source power to be this incredible. This duel turned out to be the perfect training." With a grin, he added, "Thanks to you, Leah, I've reached 2-star level myself." Golden lightning flared around him as he declared, "Our battle isn't over yet." Leah roared and charged again, her great sword glowing with power, unleashing another blinding attack. But Zeke Sidist stepped effortlessly and prepared a counterstrike. However, as he moved, he suddenly vanished in a flash and reappeared on the opposite end of the arena. He muttered, "What just happened?" He then realized and said, "When one gains immense source power, it strengthens the body's muscles and nerves. This new lightning aura must have changed my physiology. I can't fully control my speed yet." In the stands, Rangus was speechless. He couldn't follow their movements anymore. Both fighters were blurs of golden light and thunder. He wondered, am I just imagining things, or has Leah not landed a single hit lately? Frustrated, Leah shouted, "Are you mocking me, Zeke?" "Stop toying with me," Zeke replied calmly. "I'm not, but I will admit you're a real threat." He then lunged forward, delivering a powerful kick, but Leah blocked it with her sword, the force pushing her backward. Zeke straightened, smirking, saying, "I think it's time to end this," Leah repeated, narrowing her eyes. "End this?" Zeke replied. "Yes, I've been thinking of creating a new technique for a while now. And this seems like the perfect time, she said in disbelief. Creating a new technique? Zeke nodded. Exactly. He paused for a moment, then murmured, should I call it a first form, or maybe a special form? Leah blinked, confused. She wondered, her thoughts spinning. Did he even receive proper combat training? From which family could he have learned that? Before she could react, Zeke appeared beside her in a flash, lightning surging in his hand. He shouted, Dragon Destruction Combat Arts, Special Form, Lightning Peak. The attack struck her directly, wrapping her in a fierce storm of golden thunder. Her body trembled violently, her sword slipping from her grasp as she fell to her knees before him, electricity still crackling around her. The arena fell silent. Rangus and the others stared in disbelief. Zeke had won. Leah, lying on the ground, exhaled shakily. After a few moments, she forced herself to sit up, trembling, she thought bitterly. I can't believe I lost. I was supposed to become the next family head. I can't lose. Not to anyone. Zeke approached her. Offering his hand, he said sincerely, You were amazing, Leah. Truly strong. It's always exciting to learn something new. This fight was worth it. Smiling warmly, he added, It'd be boring if this was the last time we fought. Let's have another sparring match sometime. Leah froze, her cheeks turning red as she stared at his outstretched hand. Despite her defeat, she had a feint of happiness on her face, perhaps out of pride, or perhaps for the first time, admiration. Once again, Zeke said that they should have another sparring match soon. With a confident smile, he added that he couldn't wait for their next bout. Leah, though a bit shy, extended her hand toward him, admitting that she was no match for him and that she willingly accepted her defeat. Meanwhile, several hours later, deep inside a dimensional rift, Balsa, Elragon, the father of Leah and Zeke, and the current head of the El Dragon family, stood surrounded by countless strange and feral monsters. As the creatures charged toward him, Balsa's eyes began to glow with an intense light, releasing a crushing wave of aura and dragon pressure. He instantly froze every creature in place, drawing his sword. Balsa invoked the first form genesis of the Dragon Destruction Combat Arts. With a single fluid swing, all the monsters around him were cleaved cleanly in half. As he sheathed his sword, the Laragan family soldiers rushed forward to finish off any remaining monsters that might have survived their master's strike. Balsa turned toward the exit of the rift, but before he could leave, one of the soldiers called out to him, saying that he had an important report. Balsa stopped walking and asked what it was about. The soldier informed him that Lady Leah had reached the 2-star level. Upon hearing this, Balsa froze mid-step. His glowing eyes flickered, and his response came out cold and detached. So what of it? The soldier, clearly nervous, explained that reaching the 2-star level at only 7 years old was an extraordinary achievement. He added that with Leah's talent, once she graduated from Dragon's Nest, she would likely reach the 4-star level, or perhaps even the 5-star level. Balsa's reply was chilling, saying, talent means nothing. The next time you report to me, I expect to hear how she can be of use to us. If all you bring are worthless updates like this, you'd better leave my sight. The soldier fell silent as Balsa continued toward the rift's exit. But before he could step through, the soldier quickly added that Leah had recently lost in a sparring match. Balsa stopped abruptly and turned his head slightly, his expression unreadable. He asked, did she lose to one of her brothers? The soldier shook his head and said, no, master. She was defeated by someone her own age, by Lord Zeke. Balsa repeated, his voice low. Zeke, the son of that woman. Memories surfaced of a humble maid, Zeke's mother. That woman truly was gifted in battle, he muttered, but she died after giving birth to the boy. He turned fully to face the soldier, his tone sharp, saying, tell me who could have possibly trained Zeke to defeat a 2-star cultivator. The soldier hesitated before answering, no one, master. Lord Zeke has never received formal training. He defeated Lady Leah through his own strength and skill alone. In fact, he too has already reached the 2-star level, Balsa said flatly. I see then. Turning his back once more, he declared, begin the first trial. The soldier was visibly startled, saying, Master Balsa, forgive my intrusion, but isn't it too soon for the first trial? It's only been a month since the students began their combat training. Most of them haven't even reached the 1-star level yet. Balsa cut him off, saying, I don't care. Death chooses no time timing, no level, no favorites. Only the strong deserve to survive. Star levels mean nothing if they can't endure the first trial. Those who fail aren't worthy of the Laragan name, the soldier replied quickly. Yes, master, but then, Balsa added, also, summon Freya. Tell her to return immediately. The soldier's eyes widened in disbelief, inquiring Freya. Master, do you mean that Freya? Balsa nodded, saying, indeed. If Zeke could defeat Leica using only his own strength, then he's far more intriguing than I expected. I want Freya to design and supervise the first trial herself, and I expect her to personally observe every participant. The soldier bowed deeply, saying, as you command, Master Balsa. For the first time in a long while, a faint smile appeared on Balsa's lips. A rare, almost warm expression flickered across his face as he said softly, he's the most interesting one of all. The next day at Dragon's Nest, the students continued their combat training under Rangus. Zeke, however, was off to the side, practicing his breathing technique. Sitting in a wall-sit position, he balanced a massive boulder on his head while holding dumbbells in both hands. His unwavering focus drew the attention of Rangus and the others, who couldn't help but watch him in silence. With his eyes closed, Zeke contemplated the technique they were studying, the Strike Dragon combat arts. As he recalled, this technique was originally created by the 15th family head. Though labeled as a combat art, it was in truth a body enhancement method, simple yet well constructed, allowing even young cultivators to grasp it. Ranges called out, Zeke, aren't you going to train? Zeke opened one eye, inquiring. What do you mean? Rangus clarified. I mean combat training. We're practicing the Strike Dragon combat arts, Zeke replied casually. I already learned that. Rangus was stunned, inquiring. What? But it was only taught to us this morning. How could you have mastered it already? Zeke said with a smirk. Because I'm me. But what's more important right now is that your source power is flowing incorrectly, Rangus asked, confused. My what? Zeke set down the heavy boulder from his head and told Rangus to turn around. Placing his hand on Rangus' back, Zeke channeled his aura through Rangus's body, correcting the flow of energy. He said, there, that's how your aura should circulate. Rangus turned to face him, grateful, saying, you've really mastered the Strike Dragon combat arts, haven't you? Zeke frowned playfully, saying, that's incredible. Are you doubting me? What kind of friend are you? Rangus quickly said, no, not at all. It's just aside from my father, no one's ever taught me like that before. That's why I want to learn everything I can. You, Lord Zeke, already have your own martial arts, strong enough to defeat Lady Leah. I just thought the Strike Dragon combat arts might be too simple and boring for someone like you, Zeke replied. It's not boring. Actually, I admire its stability. It reminds me of my own dragon destruction combat arts. Though my children never liked that technique, they said it was too difficult and complicated. The dragon destruction combat arts was indeed a complex and demanding technique, but it possessed immense power. It consisted of 4 main forms, and during his battle with Leica, Zeke had created a 5th. Beyond that, there was even a secret, its final form, a terrifying and destructive ability, the same one he had once used to slay the divine dragon in his past life. He wondered silently how his descendants had handled his other dragon techniques over time. Perhaps they had modified them. The thought only made him more excited. He smiled faintly, saying, anyway, since I've already mastered the Strike Dragon combat arts, I'll continue with my physical training. Everyone has their own way of learning techniques. But before he could continue, Rangus suddenly shouted his name. Zeke, please teach me. I know it's a shameless request, but I want to get stronger, even just a little. Zeke looked at him for a moment, then nodded. All right, I'll teach you. Rangus blinked in surprise, inquiring, wait, you mean it? You'll really teach me? Zeke replied, of course. Why do you look so surprised? You were the one who asked, Rangus said sheepishly. I just didn't think you'd agree so easily, Zeke said. I'm not lying, and I know you're worth teaching. Just then, Leah approached them. Though hesitant, she spoke up. Zeke, I'd like you to teach me, too. Rangus turned to her, startled, inquiring, you too, Lady Leah? She asked calmly. Is there a problem? And she added, honestly, I used to think that no one my age could defeat me. As a candidate to become the next head of the Elragon family, I was confident in my power. But yesterday's match, it shattered my pride. I still don't don't know how you managed to use lightning aura, or how you wield it even better than Zeke's side. I do, and he muttered half-jokingly. So now this is my fault, determined, Leah continued, saying, I want to become stronger, strong enough to defeat our older brothers and you as well, Zeke. Please teach me. Zeke fell silent for a moment. Deep in thought, since Zeke didn't answer right away, Leah asked if he was really fine with it. Even though he was also a candidate to become the next head of the Laragan family, Rangus agreed with her, realizing that even though Zeke was an illegitimate child, Balsa El Ragan was still his father, which technically made Zeke one of the successors. Whether he liked it or not, Zeke calmly replied that he didn't mind. But the real question was whether Leah's body was in good condition to train, saying that from what he saw in their match, her injuries would normally take at least a month to heal. Leah shook her head and said she had already used a healing potion, so there was no need for him to worry. Zeke and Rangus exchanged a look. Whispering to each other, Zeke asked if that medicine truly had such absurd effectiveness. But Rangus replied that if Zeke was referring to the basic potion given during the entrance exam, it definitely wasn't strong enough to heal Leah's wounds so quickly. Because she was the daughter of the family head, she must have used a much stronger kind of potion. Zeke sighed in amazement, muttering that this era truly was something else. Leah nodded, admitting that without the potion she would have been bedridden for at least a month. But now what mattered most was her request whether Zeke would agree to train her as well. She knew that he too needed to train, but she wanted to grow stronger under his guidance. Zeke agreed without hesitation, saying that he never turned down young people with ambition. Both Leah and Rangus were surprised by his answer. Leah pointed out that he was also young like them. While Rangus added that they were about the same age, Zeke chuckled and agreed. Then, with a teasing tone, Zeke asked if she was truly sure about having him as her instructor. After all, he was the one who defeated her. Leah replied firmly that she didn't care about that. She didn't have the luxury to be picky if she wanted to become the next head of the Laragan family. She had to become stronger, no matter what it took. Zeke remembered how during their first encounter, she had mentioned her dream of becoming family head. He asked why she seemed so obsessed with that goal. Without hesitation, Leah answered that if she failed to become family head, she would only be used for a political marriage. She spoke bitterly, saying that in the best-case scenario, she'd probably be forced to marry one of her cousins, but the worst case would be marrying a man she didn't even know. Zeke's expression darkened, anger flickering in his eyes as he asked what she meant by that. Leah said it was natural, considering how valuable the Laragan bloodline was, especially within the 4 branches of the family. Their source power was special. It could be used in countless ways. That's why the family was obsessed with keeping their bloodline pure. Rangus shuddered, sensing the terrifying aura that suddenly emanated from Zeke. His voice turned cold and sharp as he said that the Laragan family had truly begun doing disgusting things like this. He clenched his fists, saying he would destroy such filthy and meaningless traditions. But before the atmosphere could grow heavier, several instructors arrived, immediately drawing everyone's attention. Leah blinked in surprise, wondering why they had come, while Zeke muttered that the timing couldn't be worse. He worried that they might have overheard what he just said. Then, from behind them, a woman with fiery red hair appeared. One instructor stepped forward and announced that starting today, they would have a new instructor. Despite how busy this person was, she had taken the time to teach them personally, so they should be grateful. As the red-haired woman approached, she reached out her hand toward Leah and asked if she was Lady Leah. Feeling a wave of danger, Leah instinctively leaped backward. Zeke stepped forward protectively while Rangus grabbed onto his arm in fear. The red-haired woman smiled faintly, praising Leah's sharp reaction and saying her aura quality wasn't bad at all. Zeke frowned slightly. He hadn't even sensed her presence until now. Rangus nervously asked who she was. The instructor then introduced her as Lady Freya Fewick of the Black Dragon Corps. Freya gave a polite smile and greeted everyone, saying she was pleased to meet them all. She then looked straight at Zeke and asked if he was Lord Zeke. When he confirmed it, she asked if he wasn't surprised by her sudden appearance. Zeke replied calmly that nothing she did was surprising. Freya froze for a moment as Zeke's eyes began to glow faintly, and he commented that her stealth technique was rather interesting. Freya quickly realized why even the family head, Balragan, was interested in this boy. Meanwhile, Zeke analyzed analyzed her movements. He noticed her source power was concentrated in her lower body, following a flow pattern he had never seen before. That must be why her footsteps made no sound at all. A spark of excitement lit up his eyes as he wondered what kind of martial art she used. Freya then took command of the class. She confirmed that she would be their new instructor. The students began whispering among themselves in disbelief. Lady Freya, the Tempest Wind, was known as one of the strongest warriors in the family. The other instructor confirmed that Freya was a 6-star practitioner under the Black Dragon Corps, the elite unit serving directly under the family head himself. The students were in awe, unable to understand why someone of her rank would come teach at their academy. Freya smiled faintly and said she would indeed train them, but under one condition. They had to pass a simple test. The students gasped at her words. She told them not to worry. The test was simple. They just needed to bring crystal like the one she's holding and survive for 1 full month inside the poison dragon mountain. Rangus went pale at the name, while Zeke felt a sense of nostalgia. The poison dragon mountain, he explained, was home to countless poisonous creatures. Even brushing against a single leaf could kill an ordinary human instantly. It was a region of pure danger. Zeke recalled how in his previous life, he had often used that place as his personal training ground. Still, he thought this test might be too cruel for young students. Freya explained the rules. Each student would receive 1 crystal orb. If their orb broke or was lost, they would immediately be disqualified. When someone nervously asked what happened to those disqualified, Freya replied bluntly, they would be expelled from the dragon's nest. She added that they didn't need to worry about the poison itself. If they properly used the dragon's breath-breathing technique, they would be fine. As long as they held on to their orbs and controlled their breathing, they could survive. Leah pointed out that aside from poisonous plants, there were monsters there too. Freya's eyes turned sharp as she said they would need to defeat those monsters themselves, since that was the only way they could secure food. Without hunting, they wouldn't last even a few days. The students were horrified. Retin muttered that it was impossible. Many doubted whether their basic combat technique, the strike dragon, could even hurt the creatures living there. Freya smirked and told them not to panic. They had 5 days to prepare. During that time, they could each choose a basic weapon art from the Laragan family archives to learn. If they mastered it, their survival chances would improve. But if they failed to learn it within 5 days, she would not take responsibility for whatever happened in the mountain. One student asked timidly if Freya would help them in case things got too dangerous. Freya chuckled darkly, saying, "You're in the dragon's nest, the land of the Laragan family. Here, the weak do not last. Only the strong survive. If you can't defeat a few monsters on your own, then you might as well sleep peacefully beside them in the bed of poison." The students trembled in terror, sweat dripping down their faces. Rangus was on the verge of tears, while Leah stayed silent in deep thought. Zeke frowned to himself, wondering if this was still the same Laragan family he once knew. It felt so different from when he had been the family head. Freya then said that was all for now. She began distributing martial arts books for every weapon type and told them to step forward to pick whichever technique they wanted to learn. As students crowded around, Rangus hesitated, unsure what to choose. Zeke advised him to take a spear technique, reminding him that he used a spear during the entrance exam. Rangus quickly agreed and thanked him. Leah said she would pick a great sword technique since she already knew the lightning great sword's basic forms. But Zeke stopped her, suggesting she try axe arts instead. Leah asked why, and Zeke explained that it would help cover her current weaknesses. Since it was Zeke who suggested it, she didn't argue and just nodded quietly, trusting his words. Freya then asked if everyone had chosen their books. When they confirmed, she told them to make good use of the remaining 5 days. Their survival depended entirely on mastering those techniques. If they failed to do so, they would die pathetically in the poison dragon mountain. Just as she was about to leave, Freya suddenly remembered something and turned back. She warned them that during the test, their seniors would be trying to steal their crystal orbs. Rangus was stunned and asked what she meant. Freya explained that their 10-year-old senior group would also be taking the same test, but their task was to hunt down and steal the orbs from the younger younger batch. She added that the younger students outnumbered the seniors, and since the Poison Dragon Mountain was vast, they might get lucky and avoid confrontation. Still, their seniors would use everything they had to find and attack them. After saying that, Freya turned and left. Rangus looked terrified, sweat dripping down his face as he asked what they were supposed to do now. Not only did they have to deal with poisonous monsters, but also with upperclassmen hunting them. Leah frowned and said that every upper-ass-man was at least 1-star level or higher. If they ganged up on her, she wouldn't last long, and most of their classmates probably wouldn't survive either. Zeke nodded, saying she had a point. If Leah couldn't fight alone, then she should form a group of 2 or 3. Cooperation wasn't forbidden after all. They could help each other hunt monsters and defend against seniors. When Rangus asked about Zeke's plan, Zeke simply said that he intended to go solo and enjoy the exam. Leah sighed and admitted that somehow that sounded just like him. Before they began training, Zeke suggested they eat first. As they walked away, Leah glanced at Rangus and asked if he didn't think Zeke was a little strange. Sometimes Rangus shrugged and replied, "Yeah, sometimes." 5 days later, the students gathered before the Poison Dragon Mountain. Their emotions mixed between fear and determination. Freya stood before them, a confident smile on her face, and declared that the weather was perfect for the test to begin. Nervously, Rangus said that the exam was finally about to begin. Even though this was Zeke's plan, he couldn't help but wonder if it was really okay for someone like him to be part of Lady Leah's team. After all, there were many noble-born students she could have chosen instead of him. Another student said, "A mere commoner who hadn't even reached 1 star yet. We're the same, Rangus." When Rangus turned around, he recognized them as Raymond and Celine, who came from the East Hall of Dragon's Nest, admitted she was also a commoner and couldn't believe she'd been chosen to join Lady Leah in the upcoming trial at Poison Dragon Mountain. Raymond, also from the East Hall, smiled as he looked at Lady Leah, but Leah quickly said that it didn't matter whether her teammates were nobles or commoners. She had chosen them because she recognized their potential and abilities. Hearing this, Rangus fell silent for a moment, then gripped his spear tightly and declared that he understood and that he would do his best not to become a burden to their group. Raymond followed, saying he would give his all to meet Leah's expectations. Leah smiled brightly and said, "I'm counting on you all." Then she turned to Zeke and asked if he was truly planning to take the trial alone. Zeke nodded confidently, saying he couldn't wait for it to begin. Celine, still nervous, admitted she admired both Zeke and Leah. While she was trembling in anxiety, Zeke was brave enough to face Poison Dragon Mountain on his own. Raymond remarked that it was natural for them to be confident since the blood of family heads flowed through their veins. But Leah quickly interjected, telling him not to compare her to Zeke because even she felt nervous. Zeke asked, "You're nervous? Is there even a reason to be nervous? Aside from you, everyone here seems like a group of promising students." However, they all replied that there were plenty of reasons to be nervous about the upcoming trial. Leah then asked Zeke if he truly thought the students she picked were skilled. Zeke immediately confirmed it and thought to himself that Leah had successfully gathered some of the most promising students in the academy. He realized that her eye for talent was indeed remarkable. He praised their group's offense and defense, saying the trial would surely be easy for them. Rangus replied with a drop of sweat running down his cheek, saying, "You're right. You've always been too confident, Zeke." Freya then asked if all the participants have arrived and soon noticed that many of the students had already formed groups. Since some weren't yet masters of their weapon arts, forming teams wasn't a bad idea. Freya then stepped forward and announced that the trial would begin shortly. She explained once again that their task was to survive for 1 full month in Poison Dragon Mountain and protect their crystal orbs. They would only pass if their orbs remained intact. Every orb was identical, meaning that if one lost theirs, it could be stolen by others. Many students grew anxious upon hearing this, while Zeke realized that this meant stealing orbs from other participants was fair game. Freya continued, saying that after the new students entered the mountain and settled, upperclassmen would also enter to steal their crystal orbs. The upperclassmen mocked them, saying that since most of the new students hadn't even reached 1 star, taking their orbs would be easy. Hearing this filled Zeke's classmates with mixed emotions, fear, excitement, and unease. Freya concluded the explanation, and as soon as she announced that the trial had officially begun, the students dashed toward Poison Dragon Mountain. Watching them go, Zeke heard Leica tell him to make sure he survived. He smiled and said he would, but that they should survive as well. Leica then called out to her team, and as Zeke told them to be careful, Freya noticed him. She said, "It's your turn to enter, Zeke," Zeke replied, apologizing for getting a bit carried away. Freya asked, "Carried away? Aren't you nervous at all?" Zeke replied with a calm smile, "No," before walking toward the mountain. Freya watched him go, thinking to herself that he was indeed a peculiar boy that night. At the camp outside Poison Dragon Mountain, one of the instructors asked Freya if the new students would be all right. When she asked what he meant, he said the trial seemed too early for beginners. Another instructor agreed, pointing out that most had only been in Dragon's Nest for a few months, that few had achieved even 1 star, and that they lacked real combat experience. He wondered how many would actually survive. Freya reassured them, saying there was no need to worry. Although the mountain was filled with poisonous creatures, most of them were only 1 or 2 starly beasts, not strong enough to pose serious danger. With a cheerful smile, she said the students would do fine. Then, under her breath, she whispered that she would eventually release that thing. When an instructor asked what she said, Freya simply smiled and replied, "Nothing." She then announced that it was time for the upperclassmen to begin their part of the trial. The older students immediately ran off toward the mountain, their eyes gleaming as they carried their weapons. Watching them leave, Freya murmured, "I wonder how many will survive. I can't wait to see the results." Meanwhile, inside the Poison Dragon Mountain, as the upper-ass men began their hunt, one of them spotted their first target. It was none other than Zeke, still standing motionless at the foot of the mountain. One said, mockingly, "The newbies entered the mountain long ago. Is this guy stupid or what?" Another raised his crossbow and prepared to shoot, but before the arrow could reach him, Zeke effortlessly caught it mid-air. As the upper-assmen stared in disbelief, Zeke snapped the arrow in half and said, "I've been waiting for you." One of them asked what he meant, but another shouted that it didn't matter. Didn't they see how he caught that arrow? Without wasting a second, Zeke dashed forward. His eyes sharp with excitement, he said with a smirk, "Now then, let's play together." In the deeper part of Poison Dragon Mountain, Celine and her group were under attack by the mountain's monsters. After Celine slew a massive frog-like creature, another one suddenly leapt from behind her. Raymond swiftly raised his shield, blocking the attack and saving Celine just in time. With a powerful swing, he bashed the monster to the ground and drove his shield straight into its body, killing it instantly. Seeing that Rangus was easily defeating his own opponent, Raymond smiled in satisfaction. Leica then praised them for their excellent teamwork, and Rangus gratefully thanked her. However, his eyes widened when he saw the mountain of slain frog monsters that Leica had single-handedly defeated. Selena, impressed, remarked that Leica's power was truly on another level, just as they had expected. Raymond agreed, saying that while they were busy fighting a few monsters, Leica had already wiped out most of them by herself. Leah simply shrugged, saying it was only natural. After all, she was a 2-star warrior, and these creatures were nothing more than a warm-up for her. She also noted that since the exam had started a week ago, everyone had improved significantly, especially Celine and Raymond, who had both reached 1-star level. Celine gratefully acknowledged Leica, saying they wouldn't have advanced so quickly without her guidance, and Raymond echoed her gratitude. Rangus, however, remained silent, quietly thinking how far he'd fallen behind now that both Celine and Raymond had achieved their first stars. Celine noticed his downcast expression and gently told him that he would surely get stronger in time and reach 1-star level too. Raymond agreed, telling him to be patient and keep working hard. Hearing their encouragement, Rangus smiled again and thanked them both. Leica then spoke, saying that Rangus had managed to defeat 3 giant frog monsters even without a star, which was truly impressive. She added that before the exam began, Rangus had trained personally with Zeke and had already perfected his spear handling, so it was only a matter of time before he became a 1-star. Moved by her faith in him, Rangus nearly teared up. As Laika looked toward the sky, she noted that night was fast approaching and told everyone they needed to head back to base. Celine agreed, warning that Poison Dragon Mountain was far too dangerous after dark. While they were on their way back, Laika suddenly stopped. Rangus immediately asked what was wrong, but Laika didn't answer. Her expression darkened as she stared ahead and demanded to know what a certain student was doing near their base. A moment later, a figure emerged from the tall grass. Rangus and the others were startled, and Celine and Raymond instinctively drew their weapons. The student stepped out with a smirk, holding his weapon loosely as he said he hadn't expected Laika to notice him so soon. Laika immediately recognized him as one of the upperclassmen and asked if he had come to steal their crystal. When he confirmed it, she realized that at last an upperclassman had decided to attack their group, and this one was a 2-star. The upperclassman grinned, saying that their current exam required them to steal the crystals from first years. Though he hadn't expected his first target to be none other than Lady Leah's group, Laika asked if he still planned to stay, even after realizing whose base he had invaded. She warned him that a single upper-ass-man wouldn't stand a chance against her team. But the upper-ass-man's grin widened as his expression turned menacing, inquiring, "Who said I was alone?" From the grass behind him emerged 3 more upperclassmen, all 1-star level. Their leader sneered, saying that even Lady Laika would have trouble fighting them since her teammates were nothing but burdens. Drawing his sword, he shouted for them to surrender and hand over their crystal orbs. He then charged at Leah with a powerful attack, but she evaded effortlessly and ordered Celine and the others to maintain their battle formation while she handled him. Meanwhile, Rangus, still without a star, struggled to defend against the attacks of his opponent. The upper-assman taunted him, saying it would be better to surrender and hand over his crystal. Rangus hesitated, unsure of what to do, until he remembered a conversation he once had with Zeke. Back then, Rangus had asked Zeke if there was any way for someone weaker like him to defeat stronger opponents. He admitted he was still starless, and worried that if stronger enemies appeared, he'd only drag his team down. Zeke's reply had shocked him, as he said, "Then you should surrender." Zeke explained that if the opponent was far stronger, 3-star or 4-star, then surrendering was the only logical choice, since a starless person could never hope to win. However, he added that if Rangus ever faced an opponent around 1-star level, there was still a chance. When Rangus asked how, Zeke simply said, "It's nothing unusual, you just have to exploit an opening." Rangus had asked, confused. "An opening?" Zeke replied. "Exactly. If you can find and exploit an opening in your opponent's defense, you can defeat them, even if they're a 2-star. When Rangus asked how he was supposed to find such an opening, Zeke's answer was simple: endure. Keep enduring until your opponent shows one. Rangus had been doubtful, but Zeke continued saying, "There's no other way. You can't force an opening against someone stronger. You can only endure until they make a mistake. If you can't even do that, then defeating someone stronger will always be a fantasy for you," Zeke added. "If your opponent is someone special like Laika, then you won't last long. But against an ordinary 2-star, you should be fine." He then told Rangus that confidence in his own strength was crucial, and gave him one last piece of advice. Don't overthink it. Don't think about how to create an opening or the difference in power. Just wait patiently, and when it appears, thrust your spear straight into it. Now, in the midst of battle, Rangus clenched his fists as Zeke's words echoed in his mind. Since he was weaker, he had no choice but to endure every attack and wait for the right moment. The upper-assman grew more and more frustrated as Rangus continued to withstand his blows. He shouted in anger, "Just fall down already," unleashing a powerful strike. But in that instant, Rangus saw it, the opening Zeke had spoken of. Without hesitation, he gathered all his strength and thrust his spear straight into his opponent's body. The upper-assman coughed up, collapsed, losing consciousness instantly. As he fell, a radiant light glowed on Rangus's chest. The mark of his newly awakened 1-star. Leah noticed immediately, surprised yet proud that Rangus had taken down his opponent. Meanwhile, the leader of the upper-assman was in disbelief, unable to understand why Laika's power felt so overwhelming. Despite them both being 2-star level, Laika realized that, ever since mastering the axe arts technique Zeke had recommended, she had learned to channel greater force and energy into her great sword, which explained the vast difference in power. She told her opponent that it was his misfortune to have chosen her group as a target. Then, summoning golden lightning around her sword, she declared, "This battle ends here!" Her blade struck with blinding force, and the enemy leader fell unconscious. After ensuring the enemies were defeated, Leah rushed back to her team and asked if everyone was safe. Once confirmed, the group cheered in relief. They had just won their first battle against upperclassmen. Celine and Raymond congratulated Rangus on reaching 1-star level, and Rangus thanked them with a bright smile. Leah looked at her team proudly, realizing that now all of her members had finally manifested their first stars. With that, she said that the next battles ahead would be much easier. Then, with a thoughtful expression, she wondered aloud how Zeke was doing. Meanwhile, elsewhere in Poison Dragon Mountain, a terrified upperclassman was running for his life. Tears streamed down his face as he muttered repeatedly, "Please don't come here, Zeke, don't come here." He cursed under his breath, trembling in fear, asking himself just what kind of monster that boy named Zeke really was. Moments later, the upperclassmen were running frantically, shouting for help, hoping Chapter 13 and praying that Zeke would not follow them. As Zeke dragged along one of the upperclassmen he had just defeated, the others cursed in fear and confusion, asking what kind of monster or demon he was, holding the corpse of a giant snake beast in one hand. Zeke grinned and mockingly asked what their problem was, wondering aloud if no one else wanted to play with him. The upperclassmen, now completely terrified, called him insane as they continued to flee. Some questioned why a lowerclassman like Zeke was the one hunting them down when it should be the other way around, that the upperclassmen were supposed to be the hunters, not the hunted. Suddenly, one of the fleeing upperclassmen tripped and fell. As he struggled to get back on his feet, he froze. The moment he lifted his head, Zeke was already standing right in front of him.